So part 2 of forest ecology, the forest health is affected by so many different things. It affects the topography and the weather. It holds the soil in place. It affects water storage and capacity being optimized. In fact, we did this cool research study up at Cameron Pass where we were looking at how thinning is compared with forests that weren't thinned, and how the forests that weren't thinned is intercepting the water that falls as snow or rain and affecting the watershed. And of course, trees also affect erosion by reducing it and slowing down the wind. So forest health is our goal, and it's what kind of drives what we're talking about the rest of the semester. We have to take into consideration reproductive differences in that forest site. So germination of the seed only occurs if the site conditions are favorable. And this is different for angiosperm seeds, which has a fleshy covering, and gymnosperm seeds, which are naked. Okay, and that's an open cone. Also, the 2 cycles of the tree, which is the vegetative development, which is the green leafy growth, and the reproductive development, which produces the fruit and the flower. Think again about the forest. The canopy openings must occur for shade intolerant species, and also the understory has competition for sunlight, nutrients, soil, water, and space. So when you remove a tree, it increases the understory or the ground cover growth, which is also valuable for wildlife habitat. The niche, again, is something we teach in wildlife biology, and that is the function that something provides in an ecosystem. So leaves, bark, fruit, and nuts all provide food for animals and microorganisms. The trees also offer roosts, which is resting cover, shade, and shelter, and they're hosts for many, many more organisms. The next step is understanding the logical transition in plant and animal communities over time, which is referred to as ecological succession. So the succession of vegetative communities starts with forbs and grasses, goes to shrubs, first-time tree species, forest type 2, and forest type 3, which is more mature. So you will see this when we used to do an activity with children where they would crawl on their hands and knees, and they would go from grasses and wildflowers and herbaceous plants to small shrubs to larger shrubs. It was a really kind of cute activity. Primary succession begins with areas with no true soil, and no life had already existed there. So you start with bare rock, mosses and lichens. Soil develops, and then grasses and small plants. Soil thickens, and trees start to grow. Secondary succession occurs on landscapes where natural vegetation has been removed or destroyed, but the soil remains intact. So those are the first 2 vocabulary words you need to know for succession. And I hope, again, this is review for you. So ecological succession over time in just a little bit larger chart. The next terminology is pioneer species are the first plants to grow at barren sites, and a really good example of that is fireweed after a fire or after a disturbance. The stages in between are called seral stages or sears, S-E-R-E-S. If disturbance is absent, the forest progresses through those series of seral stages. And the climax stage is the final stage of succession when conditions have been stable near equilibrium. And if conditions are right, a healthy plant community will be established. Now, I have a question on your assignment in your book about how climax is questionable term anymore, because as a forest is dynamic, not stable, but constantly changing, climax stage is not really a viable definition. The factors that affect succession are fire, defoliating insects, and wood-boring beetles. I bet you can name 2 of those right now. Diseases and blights like dwarf mistletoe, and other storms like volcanoes, and human-made practices such as harvesting, slash burn agriculture, and prescribed burns. So to finish this off, we want to talk a little bit about biological diversity. And the scope of the diversity depends on the number of tree species, the full range of living organisms that inhabits a particular ecosystem, and we're trying to get away from a monoculture, which is a system dominated primarily by one plant species. So it encompasses the genes, the genetics, the individuals, the demis, metapopulations, populations, species, communities, ecosystems. So from the smallest scale to the largest scale, and the interactions between these entities. What we are striving for is ecological sustainable forest management by looking at the entire ecosystem. This perpetuates ecosystem, I love this word, integrity, while continuing to provide for wood and non-wood values. So it means the maintenance of forest structure, species composition, and the rate of ecological processes and functions within the bounds of normal disturbance regimes. There's a whole study of ecology called disturbance ecology. And that is that disturbance is a regular part of our ecosystem. So we want to study disturbances and what is normal, or how we can mimic those natural disturbances in our forest management practices. The principles for developing biodiversity are in yellow, and that is connectivity, heterogeneity, stand structural complexity, aquatic ecosystems, and conservation at different spatial scales, which means small to large. So this is these last 2 slides are really key. Exotic species are upsetting that balanced ecosystems, things like kudzu in California, things like Dutch elm disease, gypsy moth, Russian olives, and as you should already know, mullein that moves in after a disturbance. So another important concept that I'm ending with today is resource management and the global implications. So what we're looking at is a more holistic view of ecosystem management and managing forests for human uses, integrating natural ecosystem structures and function, and protecting them as much as possible.